Hey everybody, this is Ryan Daniel Moran, and you're listening to Freedom Fastlane. On today's show, I'm going to be joined by Guy Finley. If you're not familiar with Guy Finley, you are in for an awesome treat today. I have conducted hundreds and hundreds of interviews in my days on this earth, and this may be my favorite interview that I have ever done. On today's show with Guy Finley, we talk about finding your purpose. We talk about happiness. We talk about letting go of the things that are holding you back and seeing life for the abundant life that it really is. If you're going through a hard time where you want to make some changes, or if you're ready to go to the next level in your life, then you're going to really benefit from today's call. Before we jump into the interview with Guy, I want to draw your attention to our blog at freedomfastlane.com, where Guy posts regularly on his philosophy and how to get the most out of life. He considers himself a self-realization coach, and he shares some of his insight over at the blog at freedomfastlane.com. I also recommend you go over there and download some of our free reports, which you can get right on the homepage of Freedom Fastlane just by entering your best email address, and we'll ship those over to you right away. With that, let's jump into the show with Guy Finley. Hey everybody, this is Ryan Daniel Moran. Welcome to Freedom Fastlane. Today I am humbled and excited to be introducing you to somebody who's fairly new to me, and I can't wait to get to know him a little bit better. I'm joined by Guy Finley, who is the author of some incredible books on Amazon on the topics of letting go and self-realization. He's a self-realization coach, and today we're here to talk about letting go and enjoying happiness. Guy, I'm so excited to meet you. Thanks for hanging out with us.
I'm glad to be with you, Ryan. Thanks.
Guy, for those of us who aren't too familiar with you yet, I know you've written a lot of really awesome books that people can find on Amazon. I know that you speak at some events. I think you even hold some retreats. But other than that, why don't you share with people what really jazzes you up and what you teach?
Well, I suppose what moves me more than anything else is having my own life, not being pushed and pulled left and right by the conditions around me, by the attitude of individuals who choose other roads. You know, in the end, I think, Ryan, what all of us want more than anything else is not just to have a sense of peace or happiness, but to know that we are here on this earth fulfilling to the highest extent possible our potential as a being, to really know what it is and how it is that we're meant to be in relationship with this life. And the more that an individual can find that true relationship, the more relaxed they are, the less fearful they are, and certainly the freer they are, because once aligned with reality, what's going to stand in your way?
Do you think that that is something that is found? Is that something that people experience? Is that something that people are awakened to?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, Ryan. You know, we use the word, find oneself and all that.
Yeah.
And it seems to express a kind of duality, when the truth is that, at least as far as I've been able to see, that what we call the awakening of consciousness is really just a kind of way in which a person gradually wakes up sufficiently enough to let go of old forms, old patterns, literally an old nature that on one hand is required. You know, we're raised in different cultures. We have personalities that are structured by environment, family, social conditions. And so we all have a kind of special set of baggage, whether we want it or not. But can a person begin to realize, you know what, I just don't need that anymore? I have learned in my 40 years of spiritual work that it is possible for us to be present enough to realize that there are parts of us who have outlived their time. And once that's clear to us, then letting them go, setting them down, dying to ourselves, if you will. It's not a question of being easy, but it sure is a question of seeing necessity. And in that necessity, a real need is born, and that need can't be denied.
When you say someone is outlived their time, are you meaning that they're growing, or do you mean that they're done with their purpose? What exactly do you mean by that?
It's a good example. How many of us, to use Christian terms, are able to turn our cheek when somebody disrespects us?
A small percentage, I would say.
Yeah, we would guess, wouldn't we? Maybe you could count the percentage on your first two fingers. And why is that? I mean, if we really think about these things, Ryan, which is what I urge the people that study my work to do, to contemplate things, just as a simple question, can real intelligence ever be insulted?
I would say no.
It's impossible.
No.
You can't, go call the sun a marshmallow and see how upset it gets.
Okay, point taken now. Okay, I understand. Sure.
Intelligence can't be insulted. And yet, man, somebody looks at you with a slight scowl or throws a little barb your way, challenging your wisdom or your opinion. And all of a sudden, all the afterburners go, and you're on fire. Now, maybe when we're growing up, in fact, not maybe, but as a fact, when you're a kid, you do childish things. You don't know. Your mom and dad says, don't you let that kid do this to you. You stand up for yourself, which in one world is right. But then we grow up with a chip on our shoulder. We grow up believing that the only way to deal with the ignorance of human beings who believe that insulting or challenging our wisdom or goodness, that the only way to meet that kind of low-level response from another being is to respond in kind. And then when you see one day, as you can and as are intended to, that my negative reaction to your negative comment hurts me long before it touches you, if it does. And not only does my negative response, me firing back something at you, not change my nature, but it actually strengthens the nature of the person who has challenged me, because now he or she feels vindicated. And by the way, the negativity goes to, what do they call it? DEFCON 3.
I understand.
So you see, just to finish the point, one day you get ready to get negative at somebody who's negative towards you. And you realize, my God, there is no justification for hurting myself. And the part of me that wants to, and that is explaining to me why I have to be this way, is what I have outlived. Adios. You no longer are important to me. And then you have outgrown a part of yourself and found, if you will, a new nature, a new understanding that will go before you.
Some people would call that ego. Some people would call that lower self, that part of you that wants to lash out in negativity when it experiences negativity. Do you have a term for it? And what's that like once you transcend that and you outgrow that lower part of you?
Well, there's a couple important points in your question. First, I don't give a hoot what you call it. In my earlier writings, I called it the false self, meaning a construct put together over time of conditioned thoughts and feelings, which really our personality. The thing that we are cloaked in that we wrap ourselves up in over time. There's no, Ryan and everybody, think about it. When you were growing up, there was no you, in quotes, who decided no one was going to talk to you like that, or that you were going to become a millionaire, or that you were going to have a yacht, or be a fireman. You were a kind of a body of experience, and then these impressions come along, pushing from mom and dad, educational pressure, social stigma, yada, yada, yada. And out of all of these things touching us interiorly, basically a response formed in us, and that response became our reality.
Right.
But there was no consciousness in it. It was all unconscious. So my work is about helping people understand that as long as we continue to live from this unconscious, unenlightened self, we have no choice other than to do its bidding whenever it appears, as we've always done. So the key here is to begin understanding that when we have a negative reaction, for instance, can you see, Ryan, will you be advocate for the listeners? If I'm negative towards something, can I get negative without having first resisted the condition that I'm blaming my negativity on?
Absolutely not. You have to have resistance first for it to
Right.
be negative.
So this is a big key, because many of us think that our negativity is caused by the event. But the event doesn't cause the negativity. The event triggers a preloaded nature that doesn't want the event because it challenges an image of itself. So the first thing to understand is that the resistance to this moment was already in me. I was just asleep to it. Now, next important key. If I'm resisting or fearing, worrying over an event, can we all agree that anytime we meet an event that we're afraid of or suddenly resisting, the default mindset behind that resistance must be that this event is bigger than I am? Otherwise, I wouldn't be afraid of it.
I have a question, though. My resistance, if you will, to that concept often is, well, resistance can be a healthy thing. Resistance gives me the ability to conquer things and to go after things that are great. And even as I'm saying that, I'm thinking, oh, well, that's the lower self trying to satisfy itself.
Yeah, not a chance. Not a chance. Look, physically, we do isometrics. We push the body past its resistance in order to take and break down muscle fiber, anaerobic, and become stronger. That's where resistance works. Psychologically, when you are resisting something, by the very fact you're resisting it, you can't learn. Resistance kills the capacity to learn. Because in order to resist, you must be apart from. And if you're apart from the condition, apart from that part of yourself, there's no way it can change because it's calling the shots.
What I'm imagining in my mind is like I'm taking my fists together right now and pounding them against each other. And that's how I'm viewing resistance in this way of, if you feel as though you're threatened by something and you resist it, you're now separate from it. You're apart from it. You're trying to protect yourself from it. And that's what you're saying, is that you can't learn from it when you're in that state. Whereas if you don't resist it and you accept it, and now my hands are folded in front of me and you're entwined, that's when you can learn and grow and you can be stretched, and the resistance can be a really positive thing. Is that what you're saying?
That's when it becomes not just possible, but eminent, that in your willingness to learn about yourself in the moment, instead of burn needlessly over an event, then you realize the only thing that you ever meet in any given moment is yourself. And once you really start to understand that, complaining, blaming, justifying, excusing, all of that mental mumbo jumbo that's a deflection of the moment starts to fade away, and you're left in the presence of the moment, in which this intelligence not only reveals what you have outlived, but heals it, meaning that it transforms it as it's intended to be into something useful instead of useless.
Guy, in my experience, I have seen that it appears to be necessary in order for people to have the understanding of what you're describing, for them to have to go through a really, really difficult time and eventually surrender. And I'm yet to see an exception in which somebody just naturally grew into this place without going through some sort of very difficult challenge and very painful experience. I'm curious if that's been your experience, and if that's the case, is there a way that we can grow? Can we continue to progress spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, without resorting to waiting when we're in a really negative spot in order to grow?
That's a good question. And the first answer, part one, we have been taught by our culture, as has been prevalent, I suppose, for centuries, that unwanted moments are an action of an uncaring God, a life without compassion, acting upon us for the purpose of stripping us of something that's good and valuable. That is a completely erroneous, mistaken idea. Lessons ride in on the back of events. In our lives, if we can see it, much as you have just stated, Ryan, we can see that some of the most valuable thing that ever happened to us was when we met that crisis that we could no longer avoid. And I have a saying that a crisis is a close encounter of the truthful kind.
Would you say that again?
A crisis is a close encounter of the truthful kind.
Interesting.
It's that moment when what we have been clinging to and telling ourselves is true about the world, about others, about ourselves, is suddenly revealed as having no basis at all.
Wow.
And so if that's true, which we can all see it is, you don't have to be a scientist to get that, then that means that life and the event as it unfolds that has come to prove that to you is a compassionate, justice-driven event. There for your good and your good only, and the part of you that rejects it because it challenges an idea or image about yourself is in fact the very source of your pain.
Could you lead with an example in this? This sounds very philosophical right now. Help me understand it with a life example.
Well, everybody pick your favorite. I have been, just as an example, I'm using I to pick something that we can all relate to. I have been consumed my whole life with the idea that I am only as valuable as others agree I am. So that I am an unending approval-seeking sycophant, someone always willing to dress psychologically into whatever fits the moment so that I don't stand out in a negative way and therefore lose some imagined possibility inherent in that relationship. Everybody understands that.
Yeah.
Then one day, I'm sitting there getting ready to sell my soul again. And for whatever reason, it dawns on me, you know what? This person that I'm trying to get their approval of, I don't even like them. And then in that moment, you see the opposites are glimpsed. The part of me that believed it was only as powerful or valuable as you agreed I was, then sees that the only power you have was that mistaken idea I had. Now, my whole life, I lived under that guiding, in quotes, light, which was just darkness. So now I'm suddenly aware that that whole mindset doesn't work. And I'm in a crisis because everything in me is going, God, man, you can't, if you don't smile at that dirty joke, if you don't laugh at that cruel remark that she or he said about you or someone else, they're not gonna like you.
Oh no.
And everything in you is going, God, what are you gonna do? And you do, just like Peter denying Christ. You do the thing that you can't believe that you said you would not do. And then you compromise yourself. And maybe you have to do that for a year or 5 years before one day the crisis comes and you simply refuse to die to the threat of the fear inside of you. And in that moment, just like a drug addict, anybody that's addicted to an abusive relationship, a substance, a job, anybody who's in that condition one day realizes that this is killing me, and yet I'm afraid I'll die if I don't go on with this slow murder of myself.
Man, I get that.
So at that point, the crisis has come, a close encounter of the truthful kind. Everything in me has shown me that it doesn't work to continue being what I have now outlived. Maybe it served its purpose. And maybe its purpose was just to get me to the point where I see that I've won everything I thought would liberate me, and I'm more a slave now than I ever was. So the crisis appears, and then we have to make the difficult and yet obvious choice of allowing the courage born of our new understanding to supplant the cowardice of agreeing to go on with an unending crisis. And in that moment, just as we've been discussing, I let go. And what do I find? I find that, oh God, if only I could have done that
earlier.
Yeah, a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I'm still selling my soul for nothing. Now, here's the beautiful thing, Ryan. Not that all of this isn't beautiful, but especially to me. Imagine now that you have begun to understand what we're talking about, and you can see that I am now, as a result of going through this lesson that the event brought, finally agreeing to see the truth of things and taking the side of that light instead of defending the dark in myself. I'm stronger, I'm wiser, I'm more compassionate, I have more patience, and in a strange way, I'm more confident, even though less people are interested in me.
I agree with what you just said, except I
no,
find...
wait, we got to close the deal. So now what happens? Now, the next time an event rolls around and the lesson appears, by the grace of that light that is showing me within myself what no longer serves me, I begin to realize I can close the distance between the lesson and the transformation it brings. I don't have to wait 5 years. I don't have to go through this 100 times. Maybe I only have to go through it 20 times. And then maybe only 2 times. And then maybe just once. And then, Ryan, a person begins to understand the true meaning of all Scripture, East and West, that we're meant to live and die moment to moment so that something newer and truer can be born every moment. Just as is written, now becomes your life.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And there's a lot of people listening, including myself, that resonates a great deal with. of that I
It's true. It's not my look. This isn't my truth. I'm a reporter. You know, we're all meant to be out on the front line. Every last one of us is meant to be, in the truest sense of the word, a true front runner, experiencing that which only we as individuals can experience because of the unique combination of essence that we're brought into this world with, that only it can sound out that understanding, that higher note, if you will, that living word. Only we can sound out what is given to us. And if we were all doing what we're meant to do, our world would be a completely different world. Because instead of looking to each other for a confirmation of what is basically a collection of past social values that ultimately make us victims, by the way, we would each be living a unique kind of victory in the constant revelation of new possibilities across the board, creatively, physically, spiritually. And that's the ideal, of course, and one has to hope that as some of us work inwardly and go through this process, that our planet, God willing, will gradually reflect this possibility increasingly.
You mentioned if we were all doing what we were meant to do or what we
Yes.
ought to do.
Yes.
What are we meant to do? Because you're borderlining on the idea of purpose and what
Oh,
what we're
absolutely.
meant to do. So is that
Absolutely.
unique to each person? Is
Yes.
that
Wait, in one respect it is. Just like there's no flute that has exactly the same pitch, and yet there'll be 14 of them in an orchestra. Each and every one of us are meant to be in a living, conscious relationship with the presence of the moment, with what is actually unfolding within us as a result of passing time passing through us. We're meant to be awake, not asleep, not chasing a memory that we call a future, but present
wow?
enough to understand that the exchange of these energies at all levels is a consistent, perfect convergence of what we as men and women are meant to experience. We don't get the idea that it isn't just a fancy idea that who you are is and holds everything you need. Instead, we go out looking for experience to
Yes.
validate who we are.
Yes.
And experience doesn't validate who you are, it confirms an image that sent you out looking for that experience, which means that kind of experience just perpetuates and solidifies the past, which is why we feel empty and bored and wondering, what are we supposed to do? I've done this, I've done that, I've done this, I've done that. Where's the answer? The answer has always been the same one. Look within, be present, understand that this life is intended to provide you inwardly with everything that you need in order to become an ever new, evergreen human being. Then, whether you're not, you go out, you're an entrepreneur, you're a writer, you're an athlete, whatever it is, then things are in their right order because now you're first an interior human being doing what the interior perfection requires in the exterior world. And it's more or less guiding you because you're no longer your own God. You're in relationship with something that understands what's good for you is good for everybody. And if it's not good for everybody, it can't be good for you.
I want to make sure I understand. You said you're no longer your own God.
Yeah.
And that really resonated with me because the way I understood what you just said is the person that hasn't gone through this process, that is dependent upon the worship, if you will, of other people.
Not just the worship of other people. Look, this is a great line of thought. You tell me, as an advocate for the listeners, when you get negative, when fear appears, anxiousness overruns you, what are we listening to that's telling us how to fix ourselves?
Our own brains, our own thoughts, our own fears.
Our own resistance-driven negative states. Our guide in that moment is fear disguising itself as intelligence, is resistance presenting itself as the road to a world where we won't have that pain anymore, which is the same as saying that those unconscious dark parts of ourselves are our God in that moment.
Wow.
And I don't care how religious any of the listeners think they are, you don't understand until you look and see in the moment that running to any fearful thought or feeling, any anxious worry to tell you who you are and what to do in that moment is the same as abdicating yourself to a dark energy whose only interest is the continuation of itself through your life and your possibilities. Once we see that, Ryan, the jig is up. Then we know what it means to lay ourselves down for the sake of something greater, because we're no longer interested in proving ourselves. We're only concerned with the constant discovery of ourselves through the presence of this revelation.
I know that when I went through this process, in my experience, other people, there was a mixed reaction from the people around me. They could notice that there was a change, and some people thought it was great and they loved it, and yet other people felt incredibly threatened by it, Guy.
That's the exact right word too, Ryan.
They felt very threatened. It was like my change in realization of my evolution as a human being threatened them in their state and staying the same. And I've never heard anyone address this before, and I would love to hear your thoughts.
Look, we all live with an unconscious assumption. And until it's seen as being just that, and really quite a negative presumption on our part, nothing truly positive can happen. And what's the negative assumption? The negative assumption is, the unconscious assumption is that we want to become better human beings. The fact of the matter is, there is a part of us that longs to more perfectly reflect the intelligence, the wisdom, and the love that we sense is not just a possibility, but that we're meant to be a part of. But what we don't understand is that also living in us at the same time, connected to this false self, this body of our past, is that nature is no more interested in changing than a leopard is interested in growing stripes.
Wow.
All things that exist want to continue living and perfecting themselves. This is a golden rule of nature. And that means that this unconscious nature in us is not interested in perfecting itself according to what would be right and bright. It's interested in protecting and pursuing that which strengthens it and its continuation. This understanding gradually leads us to realize that whenever we get ready inwardly and we want to change, why would there be a crisis unless there was something in me resisting a change in my consciousness? So the crisis is the moment in which this unconsciousness, this darkness, not morally speaking, although it could be, this dark matter is suddenly illuminated by a revelation, a bit of light that shows it for being what it is. The old story, the old Native American story, where the boy goes and says, "Grandpa, there's two wolves and they're fighting, inside of me. One of them is a good wolf. The other is a bad wolf, Grandpa. But the fight is tremendous. Who's going to win, Grandpa?" You know the story?
I don't know the story.
And Grandpa says, the elder says, the one you feed.
Hmm.
That's who will win. That's what spiritual work is about. Not about some pie in the sky, glorified self that can suppress the presence of these resistant parts, but by doing the diligent work in which we begin to realize that my task in the moment is to be present to what wants to reveal me to myself. And if I'll do that, then little by little, then these aspects that don't want to be changed, that don't want to die, so that something new can be born from them, that's what'll happen. And Ryan, when we go through that, we meet other human beings within whom the same struggle exists. It's one consciousness. And there are those who go, you know what? Kind of scares me. I don't really know. Listen to this. I don't really know who I am anymore around you. Because you're no longer that which I have a continuous relationship with. You've become something new. Therefore, I'm going to have to become something new. That's what threatens people, is that the stayed image of Ryan, or whoever it may be, is no longer there as this iconic individual that you can be negative towards because he's always impatient. Suddenly I'm not impatient. What are you going to do with that body of your past that's always punishing, in your mind anyway, judging the impatient guy? He's not there. And that threatens that nature.
That reminds me of a quote that has been ascribed to the Buddha, which is when he was traveling around speaking, that he had someone who would follow him around insulting him on a constant basis.
Yeah.
And finally the Buddha turned to him and said, if one offers a gift and the receiver does not receive it, to whom does it belong to? And the man who was insulting him said, well, the person who offered the gift. And he said, and if I do not accept your insults, to whom does it belong to? And that's what you were just saying reminded me of that. Look, if we have no negativity to feed other negativity, what does the person who is providing that have to do with that? They have to change. They have to shift in some way, and that can be scary.
You can't find a tradition that doesn't have that idea of what concern is it to the elephant of the dogs barking at its heel.
So, Guy, you mentioned that every I don't remember the word you used, but every belief that we have wants to continue down its path of feeding itself, if you will.
Yes, absolutely.
If that's true, how do we know what's right?
Because what's right isn't intellectual. What's right isn't found in thought. What's right is that inwardly, which shows you in any given moment, I cannot possibly be harming myself and be doing right. And if I'm harming myself, and how do I know I'm harming myself? Because I can feel fear. I don't think about it. I can see it. I can see the impatience. If you're negative, you're wrong. Period. That's the great golden rule. The idea of do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Well, loving my neighbor as myself means that the first action is awareness of myself.
Yeah.
And if I have the awareness of the fact that I'm hurting myself, consciousness will not hurt itself. It's impossible. A man or a woman who is awake and conscious of himself or herself in the moment may have a negative reaction, but it will die on the spot, because it will be transformed into an understanding that it's possible for me to continue outgrowing who I've been.
That's beautiful.
Well, I think so too.
Well, because that takes the concept of what is right outside of a list,
Yeah,
or outside of even a bona fide criteria, and it makes it to the point of if you're negative, then you're not operating right, and that can mean that if you are facilitating suffering in being in a pattern that is facilitating that, be it
right,
a relationship or a job
right,
or a business practice
right,
or wherever it is, if it is making you negative, then you are not living fully present in your purpose.
right.
And therefore, you are in the wrong. You are not operating at your full
That's right.
potential.
You are, and by wrong, this isn't a moral question. By wrong, I mean you are living within a certain realm where the possibility of you being transfigured doesn't
Ah.
exist. And everyone living in that world is dedicated to keeping everyone else in that world. Because if I see someone get out of that world, it means that's not the only world. Uh-oh.
Boy, do I get that.
Yeah.
Now there's people who will hear that, and there's lots of people listening that are in a job that they hate,
Yep.
that are in a relationship that isn't satisfactory to them,
Yep.
that and they're anybody who listens can probably immediately identify things about their lives right now that they feel negative about, that they can honestly say are holding them back from being transfigured to a better version of themselves.
Isn't that nice?
But they feel stuck, Guy.
No one's stuck.
But they feel that way as if they're a slave to that thing. How do you identify and release and let go of that so that you can change?
First, a very key idea. You might want to write it down, listeners, and then really think about it. When we resist something, it seems as if our resistance proves that we want distance from what we're resisting. But resistance is actually a form of self-fascination. It is a very deceptive form of identification. So the more you resist, whatever it may be, as the saying goes, the more it persists. Why? Because you're breathing life into a pattern that exists only because it's convinced you that not wanting to be you is the same as changing you. And it doesn't change anything. So that's first. Secondly, there is nothing in the universe. I don't know if we have time for this, but the most powerful three words in the English language, apart from I love you, do you know what they are? Can you guess?
I was going to say I love you.
Well, it is, but not in that sentimental, sloppy sense of it. Here's the meaning of it. I can learn. To learn means to use the lessons the moment presents for the purpose of those events and lessons, which is the further integration of oneself. Revelation accepted produces integration. What I was unconscious to before, I am now slightly aware of. Therefore, there is integration. Integration, of course, being love. The truth of the matter is there's no such thing as the words, I can't. I can't change my job. I can't end this abusive relationship. I can't stop taking drugs. I can't exercise. I can't stop eating pizza. Whatever it may be. The words I can't don't exist in reality. They are a euphemism for I won't.
Or I choose not to.
Yeah. And that's where we have to come in and begin applying what we're learning. The reason that I won't is because that nature in me that doesn't want to go through any tribulation or change would rather tell me I can't change than begin to have itself exposed because I'm doing the work to change. So here's a guy at a job, a woman somewhere working, can't stand it, around toxic people, realizes that, I may be making 6 figures, but my life has gone to hell in a handbasket. I'm not happy. So that person says, but I'm stuck in this house. Now I've got this payment. Now I've got these kids, whatever it is. There's nothing I can do. That's not true. You can begin to uncover the nature that puts you into that negative situation. And the more you learn about it, the more you will want to discover moment by moment, day by day. So then maybe you begin, I've always wanted to be a basket weaver. I know I can't make money weaving baskets, but by God, I love the intricacy, the science, the rhythm, the harmony of it. In other words, basket weaving helps reveal me to myself. And the me it reveals is that which is more unified, more in line with what is divine. So do you think for a moment, listeners, that if you want to fulfill the purpose that God gave you, which is to, in one respect, discover yourself, but another, glorify the divine through that discovery, do you think that anything can stand in the way of you being given everything you need to succeed that way? See, who's your God that's telling you you can't change? It's the God of unchangingness, meaning the God of resistance, denial. So we can do anything, Ryan, if we have the right understanding and the willingness to apply it. Then the change may not, in fact it can't take place overnight. But one day, overnight, it'll change.
That's wonderful, Guy. I can't think of a better place to wrap this up. Gosh, I was sitting here nodding my head and pumping my fist as you were talking. I love it.
It's a wonderful thing to share what is true. And in this instance, like you and I are doing, to be able to let others know about the possibilities that are latent within them, and that the whole idea of living with any punishing thought or feeling is a complete misnomer perpetuated by something in us that only lives to create that pain. Time to be done with all of this so that we can become different people and, God willing, our planet start healing.
Our show is called Freedom Fastlane, and we talk about financial freedom, we talk about location freedom, we talk about time freedom. But I think all of those things are simply pale reflections of real internal spiritual, mental, emotional freedom.
I couldn't say it better. That
comes from letting go and simply being present in the moment. All those other things are guideposts and reflections of that moment in which you really let go and you really transcend that lower self. And those things, having financial freedom and time freedom, location freedom, can all be assets towards that. And they're little glimpses.
Yeah, they are individual classes that one must go through to eventually begin to understand the entire celestial curriculum behind all of those individual classes.
Well, Guy, for those who want to get to know you a little bit more intimately, who would love to discover more of your work, I know you have books on Amazon. I think you do some events. Why don't you tell people where they can connect with you and discover more about your philosophy and what you talk about?
Well, the first and foremost thing is to visit guyfinley.org, GUYFINLEY, guyfinley.org. And honestly, and you know this, Ryan, a person can spend a couple of years on my site just going through the free resources. My foundation, a nonprofit organization called Life of Learning, It offers a free starter kit, MP3s download free, PDF books download free, everything you can get started with for free. And then in the bookstore and all the other things, there are maybe 200-300 products that I've produced over the years, inexpensive, believe me, less than you can find anywhere else that you can order and study. And just go there, guyfinley.org. There's Facebook and Twitter stuff there where you can also get feeds, what do they call those things when they podcasts, when they, send out this material to you on your mobile device, all available for free at guyfinley.org. Go to YouTube. My God, there's hundreds of videos up there.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's it.
Great.
Oh, excuse me. And I talk 4 times a week. I always forget this. I talk 4 times a week in Southern Oregon at the foundation to a group of students from out of town and who live there. It's a $3 donation at the door. No one is ever turned away. Twice a year, we have large events, incredibly inexpensive. All that information on guyfinley.org, including when I talk at Omega. I'm going to Southern California in November. So just a host of different things. I'm in Utah in November. Go to guyfinley.org. Sorry to go on about that.
It's all right. Guy, this is life-changing stuff. I'm a big fan of your work, even though I'm new to your work. And thank you so much for hanging out with us on Freedom Fastlane.
It was great, Ryan. Anytime.
Wow. I hope you got as much out of today's show as I did when I was recording it with Guy. If you want to get more from Guy, just go to his website at guyfinley.org. And when you're ready to connect more with the Freedom Fastlane gang, you can find us at freedomfastlane.com. We're a team of people who are passionate about inspiring, educating, and empowering people to live extraordinary lives. And Guy's one of those people. He blogs regularly over at FFL, and we also produce trainings and put on events. You can find out when our next one is coming up over at freedomfastlane.com. Thanks so much for listening to today's show, and I'll talk to you soon.